Thank you. This is happening in a larger legal context. The Spectra people are in court. Our Indian Point heroes have decided that they are guilty and proud of it. They're proud of what they're doing, and they very well may do it again because they're doing it for the health and safety of us all. We have now our lawyer. His name is Marty Stolar. And Marty, you want to come down? Stolar. Thank you. Come down and give us a little bit of an overview.
Well, I'm here this afternoon to represent 11 very brave people who took it upon themselves.
This is the mic you want to use. Who
took it upon themselves to stand up and bring to the public's attention that the license for operating the second reactor at Indian Point had expired. That means that Indian Point is now operating with 2 expired reactors. They are not licensed. If any one of us decided to drive an automobile without a license, we'd get locked up. Instead, Indian Point is allowed to continue to operate, and as the 11 brave people who took it upon themselves to bring that to everybody's attention to try to shut down Indian Point and preserve the safety and health of all of us. Their intention today, having been charged with disorderly conduct, is to plead guilty, and to proudly plead guilty for standing up and taking on the responsibility of being responsible citizens and bringing this to the world's attention, that Indian Point needs to be shut down. They will plead guilty, they will be given a slap on the wrist of time served, and they will go on to continue the fight to shut down the plant, the dangerous plant at Indian Point.
Thank you. Thank you, Marty. Next we have up Ellen. Ellen, come and tell us about the Grassroots Alliance and...
Good afternoon, and thank you for this opportunity to address this press conference. My name is Ellen Weininger. I'm Director of Educational Outreach at Grassroots Environmental Education, a science-based environmental health nonprofit, and I am also a co-founder of Stop the Algonquin Pipeline Expansion. The Fukushima nuclear disaster, as we all know, occurred 5 years ago, almost to the day. But our government officials and commissions have failed miserably in advancing the protection of public health and safety. Exhausting all other measures, residents are left with no choice but to come forward in nonviolent direct action to protect millions of people who are in serious harm's way from a debilitated nuclear power plant and others around the country. The Union of Concerned Scientists charged last week that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has failed to learn lessons from the Fukushima meltdown. In its report, Preventing an American Fukushima, the group states that 5 years after the nuclear accident, the NRC has made insufficient progress in improving U.S. nuclear power safety while implementing half-baked reforms. All too often, the UCS says, the agency abdicated its responsibility as the nation's nuclear watchdog by allowing the industry to rely on voluntary guidelines which are, by their very nature, unenforceable. Edwin Lyman, a UCS senior scientist, indicated that the NRC has failed to fully learn the lessons of Fukushima and that the health and safety of more than 100 million Americans living within 50 miles of a nuclear plant hang in the balance. Further exacerbating the serious threat posed by the aging and troubled Indian Point nuclear power plant is the construction of Spectra Energy's dangerous high-pressure AIM gas pipeline, only 105 feet from critical infrastructure at the plant. Leading pipeline and nuclear safety experts have repeatedly issued urgent warnings that a pipeline rupture adjacent to Indian Point could result in a nuclear catastrophe similar to or worse than the Fukushima nuclear disaster and threatens more than 20 million people who live within a 50-mile radius in the New York tri-state region, the most densely populated region in the country. The pipeline poses a serious threat whether Indian Point is open or shut and decommissioned with 40 years of radioactive spent fuel remaining on site. A comprehensive independent risk assessment was never conducted. Furthermore, the aging Indian Point nuclear reactors, whose licenses expired in 2013 and 2015, have been plagued with numerous problems, including several events in the last year alone. Since last month, exceedingly high levels of leaking tritium have been detected in monitoring wells at Indian Point. Significant concerns have been raised regarding adverse impacts to the aging nuclear plant from ongoing pipeline construction operations, which were also likely never considered. Just last week, Governor Cuomo finally ordered 4 state agencies, Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Health, the Department of Environmental Conservation, and the Department of Public Service to conduct an independent safety assessment, and together in a letter to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, called for a halt to the AIM pipeline construction and a retraction of the the Commission's approval of the pipeline project. To be clear, the pipeline and nuclear safety experts have maintained that the internal analysis performed by Entergy and confirmed by the NRC used inaccurate information, including the incorrect gas flow shutdown time, incorrect blast radius, and detonation capacity of a pipeline rupture and explosion, improper methodology, omitted information regarding the threat of ignition of a vapor cloud, and severely underestimated the risk of catastrophic failure at the plant in the event of a pipeline rupture, which could cause a scenario similar to or worse than the Fukushima nuclear disaster, where plant operators were unable to cool reactors and spent fuel pools due to a loss of power. FOIA documents confirm that a gas pipeline rupture would release about 1 million pounds per minute of highly explosive gas. The magnitude of such an energy release could cause multiple explosions and could destroy critical infrastructure that provides cooling to the plant. In closing, without a thorough, independent, and transparent risk analysis, NRC's assertion that this giant high-pressure gas pipeline poses no additional risk next to Indian Point is baseless and is not grounded in sound science. The governor has finally commissioned such an independent safety analysis, and in view of the litany of hazardous events and threats, it's time for emergency action to immediately shut down the Indian Point nuclear power plant and the AIM pipeline construction before it's too late.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Ken Gale. Just got back from Boston for the Northeast Sustainable Energy Association's largest convention of the year. And I've been noticing changes over the years. I've been going to it since Ecologic started in 2002, every 2 or 3 years. And the changes in the Building Energy Conference, I think, are indicative of the changes in the entire field of energy efficient buildings. Because this is the cutting edge. They've always been the cutting edge. In the early days, there was a lot on solar energy, and there was a lot on how to design a building so it uses so little energy that you can supply all the power with solar. And they would talk about how the government regulators didn't get it. And then they would talk about how the contractors didn't get it. And eventually they came around. The government contractors didn't start assuming that just because it's energy efficient means it's not going to work. Energy efficiency is not a bad thing. They came on board years ago. The contractors finally realized that just because it's energy efficient does not mean the building's not going to work for some reason. It's just using different materials, being smarter about what you're doing, smarter about how you do the infrastructure of the building, smarter about how you deal with the pipes, the plumbing, the heating, the electrical wiring, everything. Just do it a little smarter. So then, it's like, okay, we've got the contractors on board. Now how do we get the real estate industry to understand they've got something special here? They didn't get it. So it took a while, and in fact, there's still a lot of them don't get it. But they're coming around because they're finding out that customers want energy efficient buildings. And the information is getting through that an energy efficient building is more comfortable than a normal building. Well, people want comfort. Everybody wants comfort. they're cheaper to run. Everybody wants to save money every month. Another good thing. So this year, there was a lot of talk on the assessors, people who assess the value of real estate for how much it's going to go onto the market and things like that, would not take it into account. The cliche of location, location, location has been with us for centuries. And that's a hard thing to shake. And the fact that people move into a house, move into an office, and they're cold in the winter, hot in the summer, so they move away. That lowers the value of that building. And people are starting to come around that you really have to pay attention to how much it costs to run the building. Energy efficient is comfort. Energy efficient is saving money. So that's coming around. There are policy changes constantly as the utilities and the fossil fuel companies strike back against energy efficiency and against solar power. That's something else that all the people at the Building Energy Conference have to deal with. So it's very interesting to see the changes year by year by year. Another thing happened this year was they're now not thinking of buildings as one unit. They're now thinking of entire neighborhoods. How does this building impact that building? How can we have not just one building in isolation be great, but a whole bunch of buildings in a row, an entire neighborhood be great? What other aspects of the neighborhood need to be considered in order to save energy, save commuting costs? How can we be more encouraging to bicycles so we need less commuting? How can we be more encouraging to mass transit? All of these things are now going into the thought. What used to be one building that they had trouble getting built is now entire communities. So the future is looking good when it comes to building. It may take a while, but it's looking good. This is Ken Gale, New York City.
I saw a great big tourist bus of folks from out of town. For 40 days and 40 nights, they covered miles of ground. They had a map and compass, but they still were not arriving. Oh, they couldn't get to Pleasantville, so they kept on driving. And then one day the sirens blew, the county was aghast. It seems the aging nuke plant had an accident at last. The stockholders who fainted couldn't be reached for reviving. And they couldn't get to Pleasantville because there was no driving. The highways turned to parking lots from Albany to Queens. The politicians learned just what evacuation means. They frantically assembled all their staff for some contriving. But they couldn't get to Pleasantville because there was no driving. They knew the Hudson River was contaminated now. The radiation off the charts of what they could allow. They cursed the leaky nuke plants and its owners for their jiving. But they couldn't get to Pleasantville because there was no driving. The drivers of the buses went to pick up their own kids. School nurses giving KI were about to flip their lids. And somewhere in the distance there were terrorists high-fiving. But they couldn't get to Pleasantville because there was no driving. The parents were hysterical and tried to storm the schools. They didn't give a damn about evacuation rules. The plan went out the window, folks just cared about surviving. And they couldn't get to Pleasantville because there was no driving.
We'd like to inform you about an upcoming event on Friday, April 29th through May 1st, 2016, 2.5 days, which is about 2 months from now. Hopefully, this gives you plenty of time to mark your calendars in preparation to attend. The event is entitled Safe Energy Summit, End Nuclear Power Now. It is being sponsored by the Indian Point Safe Energy Coalition and Hudson River Sloop Clearwater, as well as the Stony Point Convergence and other anti-nuclear activists from across the region and the nation. This is an open conference weekend where the attendees will pool their knowledge and make plans together for a unified approach to shutting down the nuclear power plants. You can stay overnight, or you can travel each day to the event being held at Stony Point, New York. Transportation can be arranged from Newark Airport, or you can take New Jersey transit trains to Nanuet, New York, and you will be picked up by the Stony Point Center at no additional cost. 6 meals will be offered from Friday dinner through Sunday lunch for those who attend. To find out more information and costs, please contact Stony Point Center at the website below. Over the next few Environment TV weekly news broadcasts, we will be updating you with additional information. The Environment TV has been invited to video the entire event, so we will be staying overnight, and we hope to meet all of you.
We hope that someday, with your help, that we achieve our goal of creating a worldwide environmental communications network with at least one of our divisions broadcasting, streaming, or whatever the method will then be called to you, thereby giving you the choice of viewing it at your location and at your leisure, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, just like the cable and other television stations you are receiving now. Until then, this is the Environment TV Weekly News.
I saw a great big tourist bus of folks from out of town. For 40 days and 40 nights, they covered miles of ground. They had a map and compass, but they still were not arriving. Oh, they couldn't get to Pleasantville, so they kept on driving. And then one day the sirens blew, the county was aghast. It seems the aging nuke plant had an accident at last. The stockholders who fainted couldn't be reached for reviving. And they couldn't get to Pleasantville because there was no driving. The highways turned to parking lots from Albany to Queens. The politicians learned just what evacuation means. They frantically assembled all their staff for some contriving. But they couldn't get to Pleasantville because there was no driving. They knew the Hudson River was contaminated now. The radiation off the charts of what they could allow. They cursed the leaky nuke plants and its owners for their jiving. But they couldn't get to Pleasantville because there was no driving. The drivers of the buses went to pick up their own kids. School nurses giving KI were about to flip their lids. And somewhere in the distance there were terrorists high-fiving. But they couldn't get to Pleasantville because there was no driving. The parents were hysterical and tried to storm the schools. They didn't give a damn about evacuation rules. The plan went out the window, folks just cared about surviving. And they couldn't get to Pleasantville.